my name is Amanda. Welcome back to Make It Destination. If this is your first time here, this is my travel channel where I help you make it to your destination. So I'm excited to say that this week I'm going to be reflecting on my past travel experiences in order to help you to plan your next trip. I think with everything that's going on this beginning of January, sometimes you need a distraction. So I'm hoping to distract you, not in a bad way, but just, get your mind off of what's going on by telling you about my Los Angeles trip that I took a few years ago. So stick around. Okay, everyone, I decided to just try to start a new section of my channel, and it's going to be lessons from and then a certain place in order to help you plan for whichever city that you want to go to that's in line with where I've been. So this one is called Lessons from Los Angeles, and also before I forget, let's smash that like button. Let me just take a sip while we'll just chill and putting this down because it makes a lot of noise for some reason. So smash the like button, subscribe, click the notification bell so that you never miss out on a video that I post. So Los Angeles. I'm from upstate New York, and I felt as though Los Angeles was very jarring. It definitely was not what I thought it would be, but that's any place, but I felt like Los Angeles was like that more so. So I'm going to say some things that, are good about Los Angeles and bad, and I hope from this I could help you plan your trip there. So the first thing that I remember from my Los Angeles trip is the food. I'm going to put some pictures in here of where Sam and I went out to eat. We went, I believe, either in 2017 or 2018. It was in the summertime, and the food is on point. Honestly, Los Angeles had some of the best food that I've ever had while traveling. It's fresh. You got to think of the climate there, right? It's warmer. They have a lot of farms. Agriculture is huge for California. So I felt as though the fruit was delicious, right? I feel like in upstate New York sometimes, sometimes things aren't ripe. Some things are overripe. It's very hard to get that timing correct. But the food is delicious. It's also very affordable. We went out to eat and we went grocery shopping. On vacation, you kind of, in my opinion, want to have an equal balance of both. Just because if you go out to eat for all 3 meals, it's going to be very expensive. But also if you stay inside for all 3 meals, you're not experiencing the place that you decided to go to. So it's very affordable. When we went to the grocery store, fruit was cheap. But I'm thinking it's because they don't have the huge travel costs. Mexico is pretty close. California has a lot of farms. Also, there's lots of options. The one thing that I noticed though is, I'm from, again, I've been saying this a lot, I'm from upstate New York, but there's a lot of Italian in upstate New York. But it makes sense geographically, whereas in California, there really wasn't too much Italian, but there's a lot of Korean, Chinese, Japanese, a lot of like New Age American, which I liked. Also, one of the food chains that I loved, which usually I am not a chain/fast food person, but everybody was like, you have to try In-N-Out. There's going to be a picture of a burger here. Delicious. Oh my god. It is worth the hype, honestly. The service was amazing. It was a lot cheaper than I thought. I don't know why I thought it was going to be expensive, but it was delicious. We had our Uber driver actually recommended that we get our fries and our burger animal style. Oh my god. That was such a good recommendation. Thank you to our Uber driver. Don't know if you're watching this, but just want to say thank you. That made our food even more delicious than it was. So the food is on point. We went to a place called the Bun Shop. That was pretty good. They started out as a food truck and then got their own, brick and mortar store, which is awesome. We went to this really cool place called Jones's, I believe, and that was an Italian place. We weren't 21 at the time, so we couldn't try the cool cocktails they had, but oh my god, the ambiance. It was like, red and white like checkerboard tablecloths. We were in a cozy booth. The lights were dim. They had cool music in the background. The food was delicious. That was great. So that's the one thing I will say about LA. You will not be bored with the food scene there. It's delicious, it's wholesome, and you could really taste the love in the food, which is great. The second thing, this was the most jarring for me, especially being from where I'm from, but the homelessness problem and inequality. In Albany, there kind of is income equality, but it's not on such an extreme scale. In Los Angeles, you literally see Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls Royces, G-Wagons everywhere, right? You see, the mansions in the hills, a lot of money. But on the flip side, you see Skid Row, you see tent cities. I mean, Sam and I were literally walking over bodies in Sunset Boulevard, and I don't think pictures do that justice. It's just very jarring as a tourist to be just walking, stepping over people's bodies, to be seeing whole families in tents, just to see people living on the beach. But then you also have, wealthy areas, Beverly Hills, Malibu, all these places where money thrives. So in my head, I thought it would balance out, but it really didn't. It was either one extreme or the other. In Albany, you might see one G-Wagon. You do see a few nice BMWs, but it's mainly Toyotas, Hondas, Volkswagens. It's not so jarring in the sense of the haves and have-nots. So that was something to think about. It's very in your face. This is something, if you bring kids, you're not going to shield them from that, which I'm not saying you should, because, I guess we all have to learn, what income inequality is, but it could be very jarring if you're not used to it. So just keep that in mind when you're traveling. I think a lot of times when we travel, we have an idea of what we want to do, where we want to go, but sometimes there are lessons that you learn, and it made me very grateful for the life that I live. And also, it made me realize that I might not want to choose Los Angeles as a place to live or raise a family, just because of the jarring income inequality. The third thing that I think a lot of people know, but it's difficult to deal with when you're there, is that it's a very spaced out city. Now, I go to school for urban and regional planning, if you don't already know that. So when I travel, I tend to take city design to heart, because I feel as though that's what gives the city its energy, its vibe, right? Like New York City has the grid system, it's hustle and bustle. You could go from Manhattan to Brooklyn in maybe like 20, 30 minutes on the subway. Everything's close, you could walk. Whereas Los Angeles, I feel like on Google Maps, I would type something in, like going from West Hollywood to Malibu, and it would look close on the Google Maps, and you would hit ETA, and all of a sudden it was like 3 hours. And I was just like not used to that, because everything in Albany is kind of close. Like you could go from Albany to Saratoga in like 40 minutes. You could go from Albany to Detroit in 15. You really need to understand how spaced out the city is, and that's why your vacation for LA needs to be planned out meticulously if there are things you specifically want to do. We stayed in West Hollywood, which was central to a lot of the attractions we wanted to go to, but I felt as though it didn't give us a cool kind of niche neighborhood experience, because once I got back, I spoke to a few people from LA, and they said there's so many neighborhoods. You could have like a hippy dippy vibe, kind of a, younger crowd like neighborhood, an older crowd neighborhood. There's just so much diversity that our experience could have been completely different if we stayed in just a neighborhood over. So you definitely need a car. This is not a city where I would depend on the public transportation unless you have a lot of time, or just if you just want to, go around and be more spontaneous, but you definitely need a car. We took some Uber rides that were expensive, very long. It was great getting to know the Uber drivers, but you could save money, honestly, if you had a rental car. Have a plan of attack. The thing that worked out in our favor is that we never traveled during rush hour. So we never traveled between like 7 to 9 or 4 to 6. We just didn't want to stay in traffic. Those highways are massive, but just because they're massive doesn't mean it reduces the congestion. So if you are traveling, maybe go to brunch or breakfast a little later, or maybe have it somewhere that's like walkable, or just plan your day around the traffic, because that's something you really don't want to lose time in. I mean, you're on vacation, right? You want to make the most of every minute, so that's something to keep in mind. And I would say, just learning from my first trip to LA, choose a neighborhood that fits your travel vision. I know I always talk about a travel vision, but it's very important to choose a neighborhood that fits that. And, also the attractions you want to see, things you want to do, because then maybe you wouldn't have to pay for Ubers, you could walk around, so on and so forth. So remember, it is a very spaced out city. So just take your time, understand the landscape. I know it's hard on Google Maps, but it'll be worth it once you get there. And the last thing I want to say is kind of the mindset of Los Angeles. That's a good way to put it. It's very, I don't say prestigious, but almost like there's a lot of name brands, there's a lot of guest lists, there's a lot of people with plastic surgery. Again, in upstate New York, you really don't see too many people with a lot of name brands. You don't see any stores or clubs really with guest lists. So going there was jarring in the fact that I kind of felt, like I didn't belong there, just because there were so many name brands that I didn't know that people were wearing, and it just seemed normal to them. It felt like you're in the land of the hipsters, right? There's this mindset of like being different, than everybody else in society. But because everybody wants to be different, they almost all look the same, if that makes sense. So Supreme is huge out there, a skater brand. Sam and I tried to go into a Supreme and a Rip and Dip store, and there was a bouncer standing outside, and we tried to go in, and he was like, "Are you on the guest list?" And I was like, "No, like, we just want to go in the store and browse, right? It's like walking into a Target, like, no." And he's like, "Well, you had to sign up to be on the guest list in order to get in here." And we just looked at each other, and we were so shocked that you needed to be on a guest list to go into a store. That's not something we had to deal with. So if that's something you want to do, just make sure you do your research, because that was something I didn't even realize they did, was guest list just for a store. Again, there's a lot of name brands. When we went to Rodeo Drive, they're name brands names that I don't even know. That's something that's not very important to me, but, it was cool to see Rodeo Drive and Beverly Hills in the neighborhood. But there's kind of this fakeness, at least as a tourist, especially being from like a smaller town, of like people trying to be something, which is cool in the sense that people are trying to make something of themselves. But I think on the flip side, it kind of makes you feel stripped, because, you're not wearing Supreme or Rip and Dip or, $700 Jordans or Yeezys or something like that, right? You're kind of going in like wearing your Old Navy, just doing you, So the mindset of Los Angeles is, I could describe it to you all day, but you won't know what it's like until you go there. But that's the fun of travel, right? You get to see how other people think, even if it's within the same country, right? New York has a completely different mindset than California. So those are my lessons from California. It's kind of, food is on point, kind of travel around, even on food trucks there. Delicious. Probably have the best tacos I've ever had in my life from a food truck. Remember that there's a homelessness problem, and that's a lesson in and of itself, I think. Just be grateful that you have the ability to travel. And it's a very spaced out city, which to some people might be great, to some people it's not. As an urban planner, to me it's not, because their public transportation isn't as effective, but there's a lot to see. And then lastly, just remember the mindset is very prioritized about looks, who you are, that sort of thing. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you're near like Hollywood and things like that. But, when you're there, just experience it all. I think at first it's a little shocking, because you might not feel like you belong. But at the same time, the cool thing about LA is that a lot of people are laid back, they're relaxed. You don't have the hustle and bustle of New York, or, you know, where people are always trying to get somewhere or do something. You can take your time. So it was a lot of fun reflecting on this trip. I would definitely go back to Los Angeles, I think, with a different mindset, in the sense that I've already been there before, and there are things that I would want to do now that aren't as touristy to have a more, I guess, authentic experience. But if you have any questions about Los Angeles, or if you've ever been, leave a comment down. And make sure to like this video and subscribe. And thank you so much. I appreciate it. And until next time, y'all.